Man, why is it that my hair, if I leave it alone for a bit, it just goes messy? Now, if you've been paying attention recently to some of my latest videos, you might have noticed that some of them have some interesting stuff in them. Sometimes the video would start with, video was edited on, I don't know, Final Cut or something. One of those things. I mentioned the reasoning for that before, but let me explain it. Now, I use Adobe Premiere as my main editing software, and I've been using it for actually a little over 2 years now. It's recently been 2 years. Got it like in October of 2018. So I've had it for 2 years, and the only main issue really coming from it is that it's a subscription-based software, meaning every month I pay a fee, which kind of sucks. Now, while I am enjoying Premiere a lot, there is one main issue. I am a jobless college student, so I'm barely making like any money. The only money that I make is either from Patreon or my editing job, and that's not a lot that I make from either. I mean, luckily it does pay off Adobe at this point, so like I am thankful for that, but it only pays itself off just because I am on a student plan at the moment, so it's not super expensive. But once the student plan runs out, oh, it's gonna be expensive. So that got me thinking, what about the other editing softwares out there? There are plenty of editing softwares out there. I used to use a different one called VideoPad until I finally realized there was a lot of limitations to it that was really holding me back, and definitely proved to be true. So I thought, let's try out the other ones. Now to start, let me list the editing softwares I'll be using for this video. For this roundup, I use DaVinci Resolve, Vegas Pro, Avid Media Encoder, and Final Cut Pro X. Yes, I even considered using an Apple software for this video. Hurt my soul. I chose this because they were relatively well known, and also they were listed in Linus Tech Tips video of a similar topic for using different editing softwares instead of just Adobe. Now, before we get to editing a video, let's talk about costs. Each of these editing softwares come at a varying prices. So some were not bad, and some were outrageous. So it does limit the options I can choose, like realistically. But I still chose to review some of the softwares because I thought, maybe invest in a really good software and then it'll pay itself down the line. Now for Adobe, a normal plan costs $52.99 US. That's a lot of schmeckles. Or you could pay $20.99 for just one software. That doesn't work for me because I use Photoshop for thumbnails, Premiere for editing of course, and then even After Effects for certain, effects. Then that would really just come down to somewhere in like basically more, because that would be like somewhere around $60 US. But luckily I pay a student plan, so it's just $24.99 US. Not bad. Now let's compare that to some of the other editing softwares, like DaVinci Resolve for starters. It's free, like, believe it or not. And so it's perfect for those who are on a budget or those who are starting out. At the time of writing, there is a $4.45 Canadian studio version which you can buy, which comes with more features, but I'm going to be focusing on the free option because I'm broke. Next up is Vegas Pro, which actually has the most widest range of prices compared to all the other editing softwares that I've chosen for today. It starts at $31.99 Canadian for the 365 version of it, which is a monthly subscription. Then it's $5.49 Canadian for the Pro Edit version, and then $7.99 for the Pro. How does that make sense? Why is one Pro Edit and Pro? And if you're going to go all out, it's a whopping $9.99 for the Pro Suite. So I'm going to be focusing on the 365 version because it's the cheapest. I'm sure there are a lot of features that come with each of them that would have been preferable for some others, but I don't have like $9.99 to burn. I am using free trials for these editing softwares because I'm not spending money, like extra money on these things that I don't have. And next up is Avid Media Composer, which I've actually personally never heard of until Linus did a video about it. And I decided that since it was described as one of the industry giants, I thought I'd give it a look. It starts off at $34.99 per month, but they do offer a perpetual license, meaning it would be a one-time purchase, but it's almost $1,300, which is basically worth about 3 years of using the monthly subscription. I just want to quickly interrupt here. Looking through Avid Shop right now, this seems the prices have kind of drastically changed, I guess. So let me read you out the differences. For a Media Composer, it'll cost you $23.99 US. The perpetual license will cost you a whopping $1,500 US. And finally, in fourth is Final Cut Pro X. I'm personally not someone who uses macOS, but it's definitely been praised as a smooth experience. But since one of my friends, Vian, uses it, I thought I'd give it a shot. Apple offers a one-time purchase for $399.99 Canadian, so basically 400 Canadian, but there is a bundle you can buy that comes with the other Pro software, but I'm gonna focus on only Final Cut at the moment. Something I want to point out is that this whole video is kind of like subjective to me. I like to think I'm a pretty decent editor, but I am not at a skill of like some professional who works with a lot of color grading. Like there's a lot of things that an editor can do, many of it that I do not do because my channel is first and foremost a gaming channel and then a streaming channel. And then occasionally I do stuff like vlogs whenever I feel like it. So I don't really work with a whole lot of like, advanced features. So if you're looking for some features like that, they might be overlooked in this video. So now that we have our softwares listed, it's time to actually use them. Now with the exception of DaVinci Resolve, I will be using the free trials of each editing software. I won't be evaluating the performance of each editing software because at the time of recording these videos, my PC is not a super PC. It's pretty decent, but it's not the best out there and probably underperforming. Plus I was also recording at the same time as editing, so that also does impact performance a lot. Another thing too is on the MacBook I'm using, it is not a phenomenal one. It's a pretty old MacBook from like 2013, I believe. And it looks like this. Now for this test, I did 2 videos on each editing software, a short one and a long one. The short one was meant to be more of like a warm-up, getting to know the software and slightly familiarizing myself with it. For the long video, which was more of the Gauntlet test, to put it to the test of how well it can compare to Premiere, or at least that was the plan, but I'll explain more on that later. DaVinci Resolve is a software that I know a little bit already because I've tried to use it in the past, and just like the last time I used it, I had a big issue right out of the gate. One of my favorite things in Premiere is the ability to customize my layout, allowing me to have what I need up front, having other stuff kind of tucked away, but still present for me to access. DaVinci offers little to no layout customization. There are a few windows you can kind of hide, but you can't move things to exactly where you want. There are presets that you can switch between, but that's not ideal either. For me, I like having the timeline at the bottom, having the effects control and audio control on the side for me to switch in between, as well as some presets, and also having a dedicated window for any of the project files. Editing on DaVinci Resolve felt the most similar to Premiere, as I'm able to easily cut clips, delete certain portions, move things around, and also throw things in between whenever I want. On Premiere, volume control is on a per object basis. What that means is that one clip will have a different audio control than another clip. Even if you lower the volume on one track, the other clip will not be affected if it's not the highlighted one. It's something that might be discouraging to some people, as they like to have control over the entire track, and DaVinci's full track audio control is something I could definitely get used to, as it was something that I used to use in the past. Something that really bothered me the most though was the confusing effects. There were many times where I actually had to go on Google and search what the hell some things did. It is something that I've done on Premiere before, but I've never really had to look up how to add text, or how to detach audio from the video, or how to use transitions. It was something that I learned on my own in Premiere, and it was something that I couldn't just easily carry over, because, for example, the text was hidden away in the effects folder. Why it was in there, I have no clue. On Premiere, I only look up stuff that are very complicated, or for like special effects that I need to combine a whole bunch of other things together to make a specific effect. But I've never really looked up just basic stuff. Despite these issues, the experience was alright, but I would definitely turn to Resolve. if I was flat broke and desperate. Now let's talk about Vegas Pro. The keen-eyed among you may notice that none of the videos actually have been made with Vegas, and I will explain that later. The timeline was a mess, the effects tab made me wonder if I had gone back in time. Trying to use a simple cross transition for audio was an absolute nightmare. Trying to select clips I wanted to around was a pain. The only nice thing was when I wanted to do effects like zoom in with the camera and move things around, they put a separate window that I can use to move the camera around so it's easy to track objects, since I could still see the whole thing. Unfortunately, the separate window is how you do them all the time. In contrast, in Premiere, all I need to do is double click on the preview window and I can simply drag objects around without needing to pull up the effects tab. Another thing that hurt a bit was the non-native support for MOVs, which is a format that I use for my outro as I need the alpha backgrounds. Now, it was rectified by installing QuickTime, but it was still annoying. Now, the main reason why there were no videos that were edited with Vegas Pro was simply because the trial only allowed for videos to be exported if they are under 2 minutes long, and I was not about to sink some money for a high potential one-time use. Now let's move on to Avid Media Composer. This one, you may have noticed that there's only one video that was edited with Avid instead of 2 that I had planned. The simple answer to this is that Avid fucking sucked. From launch, it wanted to expand the window to both monitors. I have 2 monitors on my desk. I have my main monitor, and then I have a secondary monitor that I mainly use for things like monitoring stream chat whenever I stream. I don't normally use a second monitor for editing. I usually just have it on the one window. And Avid wanted to take up both of them. Now I'm able to resize the window, but every time I wanted to go to full screen, it would want to use both monitors again, so I always had to use kind of like a minimized window, and that's not great. Now, Avid did offer the most customization compared to any editing software, although it also overdid it in the sense that I was literally able to put everything everywhere. It left a lot of empty space in my UI, and it definitely felt more like a mess than a clean layout. Audio was an absolute nightmare. The reason for that is because it made 2 audio tracks per included track, meaning that my recordings that have 3 separate audio tracks, one for whatever I'm capturing, like let's say the desktop or my Elgato, and then I have 2 audio tracks for my microphone, one with effects and one without any effects. So when I put in Avid, I would have 6 audio tracks. That's an excessive amount. And once I deleted the unnecessary tracks, the audio sounded horrible. As an example, you can hear the difference if you play my outro versus the one that was edited with Avid. You can clearly hear how much Avid really just messed the audio. And speaking of my outro, Avid's way of importing MOVs completely ruined my outro. The video was able to import, but the audio was missing, so I had to import the audio for my outro, which luckily I already had a file of, but it was just completely inconveniencing that I had to do that in the first place. And speaking of importing my outro, which is less than a minute long, took 10 minutes to import. That is a lot of lost time compared to Premiere, where if I import, let's say, like a 10-hour footage, that would take maybe a minute at most to import. Editing was not a great experience either. The tools were a complete mess, as I was more confused of what each of them did. I actually ended up only using like 3 or 4 tools out of the many that were offered, because I had absolutely no idea what any of them did. Exporting was also another issue. I thought I was doomed when I tried to export the video, because there was no simple export to MOV or MP4 format. The only options it really gave me right out of the gate was their own version of exporting, which mind you would take up a lot of fucking space. And just when I thought that this project was gonna have only 2 editing softwares upload videos, it turns out there is a way to export to MP4. When you're choosing You can choose what format you want to save to in the window that is literally choosing the destination folder. I'm not even kidding. It's a small tab in the destination window that lets you pick what format you want to use. It was something so small that it was so out of the way. With all these pains, I just deemed Avid not worth doing at all for doing the second video. I know I wanted to do 2 videos for each editing software, but the pain of using Avid was just so much, I just decided I would never ever use this editing software at all after this. Now onto the final editing software, Final Cut Pro X. I've had my reservations about Apple for quite a while now, and to this day, nothing can change my mind about it.
If you rewind the stream about 5 or 6 minutes, you'll see that it wasn't plugged in as nicely. Can you bring this customer in so that they could see what Apple wanted to charge $475 for? They really told her $475 for this horse? It wasn't f***ing plugged in!
Yes. Because Apple wants 5,500 Canadian rupees. So that is about double of Apple's own price for this hardware when they sell you the system originally.
If anything, I mocked them relentlessly, but that's a topic for another day. For the sake of this video, I pushed away my disdain for Apple and tried out Final Cut. Now, among all the editing softwares, Apple is the most generous with a 90-day free trial compared to the usual 30 that most people would offer. Not to mention too that they had no drawbacks such as watermarks or limited export times, something that Vegas Pro did have. They had both watermarks and limited export times. Thanks, Vegas. Now, the experience at first was rough. I was willing to overlook kind of the slowish performance because, like I mentioned before, the MacBook I'm currently using was a 2013 MacBook. Not to mention too, the state it's currently in is not the best, and also the charger definitely felt like a fire hazard waiting to happen. For the timeline, there is simply a blank space that you can throw clips onto, and you can layer them however you like. It definitely felt unusual, as most editing softwares don't do this kind of thing, as they have a simple timeline, so it definitely took a lot of getting used to. Now, my biggest annoyance was how the software seemed to do things on its own. By that, I mean, sometimes when you move one thing, it would move the other. An example is when I cut a section of a clip, the 2 ends would automatically join. It was handy at times, but if I wanted to insert something in between, it just made a huge hassle. It is a little handy for things to happen automatically, but it's also kind of an annoyance, as sometimes I want to insert something in between the 2 cut clips, but it would make it difficult as the thing had moved already. Another issue I had was, despite the fact that I chose to detach audio from the video, sometimes the video still attaches itself to the audio, meaning that if I tried to move one, it would move the other. And I don't understand why that's a thing if there's an option to detach audio. If it's going to detach, why would it reattach by itself even though it says detached? If I wanted a section of audio removed from the clip, I would have to move the clip aside so that way the audio would detach, cut out whatever I needed, and then put it back together. It added a lot of extra steps that felt very unnecessary. Some of the tools were very smooth. One example is the ability to extend clips, and it would push everything else away. It's very handy as it's something that I've done quite a few times, but yet on Premiere, if I wanted to extend a clip a little bit, I would have to take everything else from it, move it to the side, extend in the direction I wanted to go, and then put everything back together. And to be completely honest, I felt a little bit more creative when I was using Final Cut compared to any of the other 3 that I used. It probably has something to do with the fact that I was editing a vlog with Final Cut, but the feeling of wanting to do something creative was definitely there. It was a pretty positive experience overall, with some slight, things needing to get used to. But in the end, it was something that I could see myself kind of getting used to in the future if I had to use Apple again. It was a pretty positive experience, so aside from the high price, it definitely felt like a compelling editing software. After using all 4 editing softwares, we now come back full circle to Premiere Pro, and I just felt good coming back to what felt like home. Customized layouts, simple functions, easy to set presets, and simple to use tools. After all this, I can say wholeheartedly that I will be sticking with Premiere for the long run, even if it costs me more to pay for the subscription rather than a one-time fee. I'm fine with paying a subscription, as not only is Premiere something that I've gotten extremely used to at this point, but also use the other things like After Effects and Photoshop. But to give my evaluation, here's how I would rate the other editing softwares that I use today. Coming in dead last is Avid. It was painful, confusing, and was just atrociously long when it came to import and export times. In third place was Vegas Pro. It definitely took me quite some time to get used to it and figure out certain things. I probably could have gotten a better hang of it if I worked on a second video though, but it is what it is. In second place is DaVinci Resolve, as it definitely felt the most similar to Premiere, but I also felt held back by it at certain times, and the task of finding things like how to add text just felt like an annoyance. And in first place, surprisingly, is Final Cut Pro X. It was simple for the most part, and despite some of the annoyances I had with the timeline, the rest of the experience was pretty smooth. And as a bonus, Final Cut is a more expanded version of their basic editing software iMovie, so that can be an option if you choose to go over to macOS. But at the end of the day, I am still going to be sticking with Adobe Premiere Pro. Now again, I'd like to point out that while I do think that my editing is not the worst, it is also not the best. There are definitely a lot of editors out there that could have benefited from some of the features that some of the other editing softwares offered. Like for example, Premiere doesn't have a phenomenal HDR work experience from what I've heard, but Apple does, so there is that. But like I mentioned, I am a gaming channel, and even editing under another person, I still make mainly gaming videos, and even on the occasional vlog video that I made for myself, I still don't really have the need to do some advanced color grading, like as if I was working with something like raw red footage. So that's the end of the video. I hope that this video was somewhat enlightening to some people, or at least it was entertaining for others. But that's where this video ends. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.